say, look, the Democrats with some Republicans are trying to prevent building of the wall. It's something he's going to put before the voters in 2020. We'll see how it plays out. Gabby Orr from Politico, we appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining us today. I'm Ed Henry, in for Dana Perino. Here's Shep.
Breaking news out of the White House in Washington. President Trump set to sign the first veto of his presidency, rejecting a measure that passed with support from both political parties to block the president's declaration of a national emergency at the southern border. We're expecting the veto signing to happen in the Oval Office in the next few minutes. We'll have it as it happens. Also, what comes next and whether Congress has the votes to override President Trump.
Now, Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
49 people went to pray, and as they did, they were slaughtered by a gunman filled with hate for Muslims. The killer live-streamed video of his massacre so that the world could see it. He stormed a mosque in the coastal city of Christchurch, New Zealand, just as Friday prayers began, moving room to room, firing into groups of worshipers as they huddled together in corners with no way to escape. One survivor says he played dead, helpless, praying that the gunman would run out of bullets. In a 74-page missive he posted online, the gunman raged against immigrants and Muslims, calling them invaders. He also said he wants revenge for terror attacks in Europe. He said he picked New Zealand to show that no place in the world is safe. We will not show the shooter's name or face. We will not show his video. But an editor here watched it and provided the following information. The gunman seems upbeat, almost casual, as he sits in his car before the massacre. There are guns in the passenger seat visible on the video, and one tucked beside his leg. The rifles covered in white supremacist symbols and messages painted in white. As he drives, the car's stereo starts playing a nationalist Serbian song praising a war criminal who committed genocide against Muslims in the 1990s. Our editor could hear the GPS, a British woman's voice, giving the killer directions to the mosque. For a moment, he pulls off the road, turns to the camera, faces it, and says, "Hello, lads." When he arrives at the mosque, he pulls into a side alley, remarking how quick the drive was. He gets out, opens the trunk, grabs another gun, and walks into the mosque's front courtyard. Two men are standing in the entryway, their backs to the gunman. He opens fire. The two men drop, and the killer moves inside. One of those victims is desperately trying to crawl away, leaving a trail of blood on a green carpet. The gunman walks up and fires point blank. And that was just the beginning. Our chief correspondent, Jonathan Hunt, is with us. He lived in Christchurch for 9 months and gives us the rest of the story of this horror show. Jonathan.
Shep, for the sake of our reporting, I've watched that video several times, and from the point you just mentioned, the gunman stands in the hallway of the mosque. He fires quickly and calmly and with devastating accuracy at anyone he sees, some running for their lives. Then he moves into the main prayer room. Two large groups of worshippers are already cowering in two separate corners. The gunman fires dozens of rounds into each group. One man appears to run at the gunman, but is shot at point-blank range. The shooter then turns his attention to the groups again, firing even more shots. He reloads several times. He walks back into the hallway and back into the main room. Many of the men there are already dead. Some appear to be wounded. The gunman walks slowly toward them, taking kill shots, finishing off his victims with bullets to the head or body. It is difficult to count the number of shots, but by our count, the gunman fires around 187 rounds within just the first 2.5 minutes of the attack. Once he leaves the mosque, he shoots several people on the street, including a woman wearing traditional Muslim dress. She is wounded. She lies in the street crying out for help. The gunman walks up to her and once again delivers the final shots directly to the woman's head. He then gets back in his car, drives over that woman's body, and continues to shoot other people from his vehicle. There is no sign at that point of any police officers. The video stops after about 16 gut-wrenching minutes, and by our count, 236 shots fired, Shep.
Jonathan, what more can you report on his writings, the lengthy writings that were posted online?
Well, this so-called manifesto is long, it's rambling in places, precise in others. The gunman makes his motivation very clear: intimidating, repelling, and killing what he repeatedly calls Muslim invaders. He says mass immigration is a threat to civilization, and at one point he poses the question to himself: are you a supporter of President Trump? His answer, quote, as a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose, sure. As a policymaker and leader, dear God, no. Police say they now have the gunman who streamed the video and 2 other people in custody. You can see officers arresting one of those 3 on this cell phone video after police rammed a vehicle. None of the 3, according to officials, was on their terrorism radar in either New Zealand or Australia. New Zealand's Prime Minister said her country is a proud melting pot and immigrants add much to the community.
They have chosen to make New Zealand their home, and it is their home. They are us. The person who has perpetuated this violence against us is not. They have no place in New Zealand. There is no place in New Zealand for such acts of extreme and unprecedented violence.
The gunman also said in that manifesto that he hoped to go to trial where he will plead not guilty because, in his view, he was taking action against a, quote, occupying force. Leaders around the world, Shep, have refuted that idea, saying it was an act of pure hate and pure evil. Shep.
Jonathan Hunt with the details for us. Jonathan, thank you. Let's turn to Michael Sergel now, chief reporter for News Talk ZB in Auckland, New Zealand. To you and yours, sir, I'm so sorry. Can you give us an idea of the place where this happened and the people who were the victims?
Well, it occurred in some mosques in central Christchurch, one of our largest cities, a city of quite a substantial size, and really just not a very short distance from where some of the worst consequences of the Christchurch earthquake happened just a few years ago. So it's an area that's already experienced loss, but it's not an area where you'd ever expect anything like this to ever happen.
Without naming him, can you tell us anything about the gunman?
Well, we understand that he was born in Australia. We understand that he was something of an extremist, certainly by New Zealand standards, and certainly not someone that represents common New Zealand values. I think everyone's just in absolute shock about this.
Well, I can imagine. I can't imagine how they wouldn't be. Tell us, if you could, about these particular mosques and what role they play in the communities.
Well, there's about 30 mosques around New Zealand, and they're quite sort of central to their communities. And we have a lot of refugees in New Zealand that are of Islamic faith, and that's a really sort of central part of their life and their community. And of course, there's also been Muslims in this country for over 100 years, so it's not something new. Islam's been a part of New Zealand culture for a very long time.
And it's a culture that, for lack of a better phrase, works and plays well together. It's not as if there are significant problems socially or otherwise across the country.
No, I'd say that New Zealand is sort of a very united country. We take a sort of shall be right attitude. We're not sort of big on, political divides or cultural divides. People with different political persuasions, cultural affiliations, get on very well.
What's job one now for New Zealand to begin to make sense, or at least begin to move past this?
It's a tough one because we've just never experienced anything like this. We always sort of see terrorism in other parts of the world and more in sort of very different parts of the world. We never ever expected to see something like this here. And just in the last few moments, we've heard that 2 people are still fighting for their life. One of them, just a 4-year-old child in a critical condition, having to be transported to another hospital just to receive specialist care.
You shot at kids in those mosques.
Yes, yeah, women, children, whole lot of people.
Well, our hearts are breaking for you. Michael Sergel, the chief reporter for ZB Auckland. All the best, sir. Many thanks.
Thank you.
We're monitoring breaking news from the White House here in the United States, where the president is set to issue his first veto since he took office. after a stunning rebuke from members of his own party. We'll hear from the Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace, and we'll hear from the president as he signs this veto. That's ahead on a Friday afternoon. In the White House now, a live look there where President Trump is about to use his veto power for the first time. Seems very happy to do it as well. Yesterday, a dozen senators from his own party helped pass a resolution to strike down his declaration of a national emergency at the southern border. It's a balance of powers matter. These are the 12 Republicans who voted with all Democrats in an attempt to stop the president from bypassing Congress to fund a border wall. Some GOP senators said yesterday's vote was about the separation of powers outlined in the Constitution. Obviously, the House of Representatives has the power of the purse. He went to the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives said no. In the normal circumstances, that would be that, but not in this case. The president has tried to go around them. He's still making that attempt. And they say, the Republicans who voted against him say this could set a dangerous precedent for future presidents. But both the House and the Senate came up short of the votes they need to override a presidential veto. So the question now, in fact, one that we've been pondering for the many months, will the courts end up deciding whether President Trump's national emergency declaration is okay under the guidelines of the Constitution? Let's turn to the Fox News Sunday host, Chris Wallace. You know, it's no surprise that we're here. Just the question is, who has standing will bring a suit, where and when?
Well, there are plenty of people who have standing. One question is whether or not Congress has standing, because they can say that this is not money that we appropriated and that you have decided to use it over our objections. And the fact that this vote, even though the veto won't be overridden, the fact that the House and the Senate voted resolutions of disapproval does even further the argument that Congress did not intend for the national emergency declarations to go this way. But there are also other people, landowners, various states. So there's no question this will get a hearing in the court. We'll have to wait and see what happens. And assuming that some judge, particularly out in the Ninth Circuit out west, decides to stay the president's emergency declaration, then it'll go up through the courts, the appeals courts, and all the way to the Supreme Court, which just might make this a hot issue right as we head into the 2020 general election campaign.
Which is rather convenient for someone who's been running on this topic for a long time.
Well, that's right. And in fairness to the president, he did make this a major article of faith between him and his supporters in the 2016 election. And win or lose on the national...
The article of faith was that the Mexicans would pay for it. That was part of it.
Well, that's part of it, but also that the wall was going to be built. But in any case, the fact is that he can now go and say to his voters in 2020, look, I did everything I had to. I took it to Congress, declared it an emergency. They blocked it. I vetoed it. I took it to court. Let's just assume that a judge would stay it. You know, I'm taking it through the court system. So it's a way of saying I really mean business. So I'll reelect me so I can finally build this wall that I believe in and you believe in.
They just sent, they just sent some details of the stagecraft out, the sort of show that will be put on as part of this. And we've just been informed, Chris, that some border agents and the family members of some people who were killed by undocumented immigrants will flank the president as he signs and will speak as well.
Yeah, look, he wants to make the case that this is, we're talking about the politics. He's going to make the case this really is a national security and humanitarian crisis at the border. There was a huge uptick. 76,000 people apprehended on the border in February. I think it was the most in 11 years or something like that. Not even close to back in 2000 when 1.6 million people were crossing the border and being apprehended each year. But still, there has been a surge, and he's going to make the case on both a national security basis and a humanitarian basis. We need to have this wall. We've seen him do it before. He'll do it again. And obviously, it plays to a lot of people in his base and a lot of people around the country. On the other hand, if you believe the polls, the majority of people are against the building of the wall and think that there are other ways to do it to secure the border.
Is that a sign, Chris, politically speaking? I would like your take on this, of whether he is now in a position where He's going to stay with the base, placate the base, and forget everybody else, and just figure out a way come 2020.
You can't do it because there are just not enough votes in the base. I mean, it appears that from most of the polling that the 35–40% of eligible voters are what you would call ever-Trumpers, you know, just solid core, red core Trump supporters. That's not enough to win an election. So he's going to have to expand his base. And one of the things that a lot of political experts have been wondering about is the president seems to have a lot of leeway with the base. As you pointed out, at one point, one of his promises was Mexico is going to build the wall. That seems to have been largely dispensed with now, and it doesn't seem to have bothered his base as long as he keeps faith on the idea of building the wall. But even with that base, it's not enough. You've got to expand it to independents. You've got to expand it to suburban Republicans, suburban women, persuadable Democrats. I mean, you look at where he won in 2016 in the suburbs, in the so-called blue wall of upper Rust Belt states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. You can't just do it with a base. You're going to have to expand. And, of course, one of the things that I think he's counting on is that he's either going to be able to portray or the Democrats, in fact, will nominate someone who is so far to the left, the president would say a socialist, that it's going to make it easier for him. He doesn't have to pivot as far to the center because he'll say the Democrats have moved so far to their extreme left.
Yep, a lot ahead. Chris, I'm looking forward to Fox News Sunday this Sunday, as I do every Sunday. And this week, one of the candidates who would like to unseat the president will be Chris Wallace's guest. He'll speak with the Democratic presidential contender Pete Buttigieg, mayor of South Bend, Indiana. That's this Sunday on your local Fox station on Fox News Sunday, and he'll see you on the next Fox News Sunday. Check your local listings. Should be a good one. Much more ahead on the massacre in New Zealand. We'll hear from survivors who managed to escape and the response from social media sites after the killers streamed live the video of the deadly shootings online. And of course, in addition, we're waiting for the president and his signing ceremony at the White House. Coverage of that ahead in this news hour. Continuing to wait for the president to speak as he signs his first veto, and we're now told to expect the president to talk about New Zealand's terror attack. Just minutes ago, he tweeted that he has spoken with the country's prime minister and offered assistance as needed. We're expecting the president to speak to reporters in the next few minutes, and we'll bring it to you. The prime minister there in New Zealand says her country has just experienced one of its darkest days after 49 people were gunned down inside 2 mosques in the city of Christchurch. Now we're hearing more about the victims and the stories of those who made it out alive. Trace Gallagher reporting for us on that. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Shep. Sounds like when the shooting started, the survivors did one of 2 things, either ran for the doors and broken windows or jumped under benches and tables like this man. Watch.
Actually, I haven't seen him because I just lie down under the bench and I'm thinking that, you know, if I get out, I'll get shot. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed so I could be alive.
Yeah, and one man said he actually did both, first hiding under a bench, then when the gunman paused to reload, he dove out a broken window. He said as he was running away, a man near him was shot in the chest. And then there are the heroes who ran toward the mosque as the victims were running away. They were able to help a 5-year-old girl who'd been shot and was being held by her father, who had also been shot. The heroes got both victims into an ambulance. When the shooting finally stopped, neighbors and witnesses began setting up a makeshift triage, trying to make sure that those who were severely injured got the first ambulances and, of course, the fastest medical care. Shep.
Trace, there's still really very little information about the victims at this point.
Yeah, clearly Christchurch has never seen anything like this, and by all accounts, this has put a very heavy strain on the city's resources. So they're still in the process of trying to notify the families and then locate the missing people. We do know the victims come from all over the world: Egypt, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, even Syrian refugees who fled violence in their home country, only to be victims of violence in New Zealand. Some people believe this is a byproduct of anti-Muslim rhetoric, but the leader of a mosque in Auckland says Muslims have been in New Zealand for hundreds of years and have always been an essential and appreciated part of the country's fabric. And a story I want to share that's making headlines around the world is about the worshiper who was among the first to be targeted. The man is being hailed as a hero because he shared peaceful and courageous words. As the gunman was coming toward him, the man was heard on the live stream video saying, quote, "Hello, brother." They were his final words. Shep.
Tracy Gallagher reporting for us on the tragedy in New Zealand. Facebook is facing criticism over that massacre after the shooter was able to live stream his slaughter of innocent people. A spokeswoman for the social media giant says they're working to delete any praise or support for the attack, and that they quickly removed the shooter's video and also his Facebook and Instagram accounts. Jillian Turner spoke to Facebook about this today. She's live at the State Department. Jillian?
That's right, Shep. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube all failed to stop the viral spread of the shooter's live stream, as well as that 87-page-long manifesto he posted online just a few minutes before his attack. Facebook took 17 minutes to take down that live stream. It showed the shooter driving to Al Noor Mosque, parking his car, entering, and then ultimately carrying out the shooting spree. Facebook took a further hour and a half to shut down the shooter's account, and the Facebook Watch platform continued to host versions of the video for several more hours. In a statement to Fox News, Facebook says, quote, "We quickly removed both the shooter's Facebook and Instagram accounts and the video." And Facebook's website proclaims, "We don't allow mass murderers to maintain a presence on Facebook and Instagram, and will also delete content that praises or supports the shooter or the horrific act as soon as we're aware." Meanwhile, YouTube and Twitter not faring any better. They both continue to host versions of the shooter's video for multiple hours, including on Twitter's autoplay feature. This means some viewers may have been exposed to the gruesome footage without any advance warning. Google-owned YouTube says they rely on specially developed, quote, smart detection technology to identify this type of content, and they tell Fox News, quote, "Shocking, violent, and graphic content has no place on our platforms." All of this raising new concerns today for American big tech and the role that social media companies are playing in publicizing terrorism and violence. Now, tech experts tell Fox News that despite years of these social media companies promising to do more and do better, keeping terrorism off social media is still like a game of whack-a-mole.
Jillian Turner reporting from the White House, from the State Department. This is the White House. A live look. I've just gotten word that in the last, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, the White House press pool got word to come in for this event. So we're expecting the president to issue his first veto at any minute now. We're going to get a quick commercial break. Another look live at the White House. Any moment we're expecting the president to issue his first veto a day after the Republican-controlled Senate voted to end the national emergency he declared to pay for his southern border wall. John Roberts reporting. He's live at the White House. John?
Shep, good afternoon to you. Getting some notes in from the pool spray going on right now in the Oval Office. The president talked about his conversation with Jacinda Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, saying that he expressed his condolences. These places of worship have turned into scenes of horrible killings, that he's promised the Prime Minister any assistance that the United States can provide. The president's also talking about the veto, which he has not put pen to paper just yet, but he will in the next few minutes. Remember, 12 Republican senators voted against this in a stunning rebuke, not to the president's border wall, because most, if not all of those senators support him on the border security, but just on the president circumventing the congressional appropriations process. But the president giving attaboys and attagirls to the senators, 41 of which who stuck with him through this, tweeting out this afternoon, "I'd like to thank all of the great Republican senators who bravely voted for strong border security and the wall. This will help stop crime, human trafficking, and drugs entering our country. Watch when you get back to your state. They will love you more than ever before." The president insisting that he does have the authority to use emergency powers to build a border wall, and across the administration, officials are speaking with one voice about what they say is a crisis on the border. Here's the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo.
I've spent a lot of time with my Mexican counterparts. This challenge at our southern border is real. I believe it's a crisis, but call it what you will. The challenge of not knowing who's coming in and out of our country and what drugs or people or illicit materials might be coming across our southern border is real. We need to take serious action against it, and the president's executive order does just that.
Now, the House has already planned an override vote. They will take that vote on March the 26th. They likely don't have the two-thirds majority needed to override the president's veto, though. And there's no plans for a veto override vote in the Senate. So really what the House will be going through is basically just an exercise. It's a big moment for the president. It is the first veto of his administration. Here's how he stacks up compared to previous presidents. President Obama vetoed 12 bills. One of those was overridden. George W. Bush vetoed 12. 4 of those were overridden. Bill Clinton, 37, with 2 overridden. George H.W. Bush, 41. He had 44 vetoes. 1 was overridden. President Reagan, 78, with 9 overridden. But all of that pales in comparison to Franklin Roosevelt, who vetoed 635 bills. 372 of those were traditional vetoes, where he signed the veto order, 263 of which were pocket vetoes, where basically the president just doesn't take any action during a time when Congress is adjourned, and then after 10 days, the bill fails. So the president will be putting pen to paper very soon, Shep, if he hasn't already in the last couple of minutes.
There are other efforts, I understand, to block this emergency declaration.
Yeah, well, we saw what happened in Congress over the last couple of weeks, but there are also myriad lawsuits. The ACLU, Earth Justice have filed private lawsuits against the president's emergency declaration. 21 states have banded together to try to block it as well. So far, no court opinions on any of that. A lot of those suits, of course, have been filed in jurisdictions where the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has the jurisdictional oversight. And the president usually doesn't fare well in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Let's not forget, too, though, Shep, that even without this emergency declaration, the president's got about $4 billion with which he can build border barrier. That's good for anywhere between 70 to 90 miles of border wall, depending on how far they can stretch a dollar. Shep.
All right, John, waiting for the ceremony. We'll have it momentarily, we believe. Thank you. Congress does have the power to override a presidential veto, as John mentioned, but has been successful only 4% of the time that it's tried. It requires two-thirds votes in both the House and the Senate, which means 67 votes in the Senate. 12 Republican senators ended up voting with the Democrats yesterday to block the president's national emergency, but it passed with 59 votes, so that's short of the two-thirds magic number. Could they come up with more? Mike Emanuel reporting. He's live on Capitol Hill. Hey, Mike.
Shep, good afternoon. We don't expect congressional Democrats to let this go. Last time we saw House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, she was signing the bill that rejects the president's national emergency declaration before it was sent off to the White House. A House Democratic leadership aide tells Fox the House vote to override the president's veto is likely to occur on Tuesday, March 26th. And the Senate Democratic leader says his side is not giving up this fight.
The president will first veto it. It goes to the House. He won't have the two-thirds. But I believe the law allows us to bring it up every 6 months, and certainly we would intend to do that.
The House vote was 40 votes shy of the threshold needed to override a veto. It would seem unlikely that many would flip their votes in the coming 10 days or so, but this could signal to the base that they're doing everything possible to fight the president on his border wall. Shep.
And how are Republicans dealing with this divide?
Well, as you mentioned, there were 12 Senate Republicans who voted against the president on this, one being Roy Blunt from Missouri, who says, quote, there are several existing authorities that could be used to support what President Trump wants to do at the border without creating a court case or declaring an emergency. I have encouraged him to use those authorities. Florida Senator Rick Scott was on the other side supporting the president and says he understands the president's frustration.
The Democrats are it's just pure hatred of the president. They just say they don't want the president to have a win. Well, the truth is, Americans need to have a win. The win would be have border security. I think everybody that's voting on this should have gone down the border and sat down with border security like I did and said, what do you need? And they say, and they're very consistent. They need people, they need better technology, and they need barriers.
What made a lot of Senate Republicans uncomfortable was this showdown coming on one of the president's biggest promises to build that border wall. Shep.
All right, Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill. Thank you. A live look there at the White House. The get-together has begun. This, as it turns out, is one of those events where the pool will video this, and then they'll play the video out for all the television networks. And when that happens, we'll have it for you. The signing has not yet happened. The president is speaking. More to come. Events ahead. Now, the event is underway at the White House. I have nothing to indicate yet that the veto has happened, but we're going to hear from the president on a number of different subjects in just a minute. Our senior Capitol Hill producer, Chad Pergram, is up there. There's a lot ahead. This isn't the end of it.
That's right. Well, you know, we're told that the veto override attempt happened on March 26th. The House and Senate are out next week. And, Shep, this will only go to the House. Under the Constitution, bills, once they're vetoed by the president, if they are sent back to Capitol Hill, they are sent back to the body of origination. So this originated in the House. It was passed in the House. It went over to the Senate. The Senate passed it yesterday. Nancy Pelosi signed it. The president vetoes it, sends it back up to Capitol Hill. Now, there was some discussion yesterday here on Capitol Hill, Shep, as to whether or not they would go through the entire process and attempt a veto override. The House isn't at full population right now, not at 435 members, so the threshold to override on this is about 285. When they passed this in the House a couple of weeks ago, they came 40 votes short. They had 245 yeas. So there was a question as to whether or not the House, just because they didn't have the votes, would they try it? But number two, could this be a bad political vote for freshman moderate members from battleground districts to take a vote on that, saying, hey, you know, we're going to vote to try to override the president's veto. Keep in mind that there are 31 Democrats in the House who represent districts that President Trump carried. Now, the flip side of that is you could be trying to put pressure on Republicans. Are they going to stand with the president or not? Democrats had unanimity when this moved through the House of Representatives a couple weeks ago. There were 13 defections on the Republican side who voted with the Democrats. There are only 3 Republicans, Shep, who represent districts that were carried by Hillary Clinton. So, you know, Nancy Pelosi might just be trying to say, all right, we're going to run through the process here. The last time there was a failed override attempt in the House was early 2016. Paul Ryan tried to move through a veto override on a bill to repeal Obamacare that President Obama had vetoed. They knew it was going to come up short, but Paul Ryan kept saying, we're just going to run out the string here. We're going to go through the process. And that seems to be, Shep, precisely what Nancy Pelosi is doing in this case.
It isn't largely this, or at least in part, a matter of who captures the narrative here. I mean, there's the one from the president that says, you know, vote with me, vote for security. And then there's the one from the other side that says, look, we're all for border security. We have different ideas about how it should happen. But this vote is about the Constitution, which says that the House controls the purse strings and makes those decisions, the balance of power, depending on which of those narratives sort of wins the day.
Yes, it's certainly an effort to try to put some of those Republicans on notice. And if Nancy Pelosi can continue to build that case against President Trump, it helps whoever is the nominee in 2020. So that's part of it. You know, there's a saying in British politics. It's called cakeism. Have your cake and eat too. And what you're seeing from a lot of congressional Republicans, they want the border wall. They don't want to use the national emergency, yet they're very concerned about pirating some of that money away from these 4 different spending pots from programs they like. So they want to have a backfill there. Cakeism, as I say. So, you know, there is a lot of the narrative, and that's where a lot of people on Capitol Hill, especially on the Republican side, and particularly on the Senate side, among Senate Republicans, are trying to have it 2 ways, Shep.
Yep, Chad Pergram up on the Hill. Chad, appreciate it. We'll be standing by with you as the event is underway. Of course, we'll have all the video of all of it in just a few minutes. We're keeping a close watch on Israel and the Gaza Strip this afternoon to see whether an early morning truce is holding between the Israeli military and Hamas after a tense night of rocket fire and airstrikes. Of course, the sirens began echoing around Tel Aviv and central Israel just about this time yesterday, a warning that Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system detected incoming rocket fire. The city opened public bomb shelters, and at the time, the military reported that Iron Dome intercepted one of the missiles. Now we're told that by the military that they did not intercept the rockets launched at Tel Aviv, but did indeed shoot down 3 others, which was the source of their own confusion, and that those came from the Gaza. Hamas denies that it fired the rockets. Still, in response, Israel hit about 100 Hamas targets in the Gaza overnight. Military officials now say it looks to them like the rockets were a misfire. Trey Yingst reporting live for us tonight from Jerusalem. Trey?
Shep, an extremely tense situation here over the past 24 hours as Israel conducted those airstrikes in Gaza last night. Militants there began to fire more rockets into southern Israel. Our cameras captured the exchange of fire. Some of them were intercepted by Israel's defense system, the Iron Dome. As the night went on, Israeli fighter planes and attack helicopters fired missiles at targets mostly associated with Hamas, the group in control of the Gaza Strip. 4 Palestinians were injured in the strikes, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. I did speak today with a senior Hamas official inside Gaza, Shep, who indicated that the weekly border demonstrations would be canceled today. I also just received a text from that official just now, Shep. He said the situation is still tense, but he described it right now as okay. Shep?
Trey Yanks reporting live from Jerusalem. Trey, thank you. North Korea is threatening to suspend nuclear talk with the United States and start testing again, less than a month after President Trump left his summit with Kim Jong-un with no agreement. A senior North Korean official tells the Associated Press that Chairman Kim has mysteriously wonderful chemistry, and that's a quote, mysteriously wonderful chemistry with President Trump, but does not like the atmosphere of hostility, and that's another quote, created by the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the National Security Advisor John Bolton. Pompeo responded thusly.
In Hanoi, on multiple occasions, he spoke directly to the president and made a commitment that he would not resume nuclear testing, nor would he resume missile testing. So that's Chairman Kim's word. We have every expectation that he will live up to that commitment.
Well, according to senior North Korean official Kim Jong-un will make a decision soon. Let's turn to Michael O'Hanlon. He's a senior fellow in foreign policy at the Brookings Institution, specializing in the use of military force and U.S. defense strategy. You know, you hear him say we have every belief that he will do what he says he was going to do. What historically would suggest that Kim Jong-un will do what he says?
Hi, Shepard. Well, yeah, very good point. The question almost answers itself when you put it that way. I think, though, that Kim Jong-un is probably trading positions in public with the Trump administration, not so much the president, but Steve Biegun, a very able young man who's a very good negotiator for us. But Biegun has recently said we're not going to do any partial denuclearization. We are only going to do a deal that completely eliminates all North Korean nukes and production capability in one fell swoop. I think that's a non-starter. Most North Korea specialists think that's a non-starter. So I'm hopeful that Kim Jong-un is just sort of returning rhetorical hardline fire with fire, and that both sides are sort of alerting the other. You're going to have to rethink your extremist views, or there can't be any deal, and maybe we're back to the precipice like in 2017. So I don't take anything to be what it seems or what the words actually say. I think we're seeing negotiations happen in public, and I still hope we could move towards a compromise.
Michael, forgive me, but there's breaking news. The veto is signed. Our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, is live there at the White House. John?
We got notification from the pool just a couple of minutes ago, Shep, that the president has put pen to paper and issued the first veto of his administration, vetoing that measure which would block his emergency declaration. In doing it, the president said that he would veto this reckless resolution. That's what it was. We're on track for 1 million people rushing our borders this year. People hate the word invasion, but that's what it is. Also present at the veto signing was the Attorney General William Barr, who backed the president up on his executive authority to declare a national emergency. The vice president was there. Kirstjen Nielsen, the Secretary of Homeland Security. You mentioned a number of angel parents who have had children killed by people who are in this country illegally, and there was also a law enforcement presence there as well. Do not have notification yet that the pool has exited the Oval Office, though they shouldn't have much reason to hang around too much longer now that the president has signed it. So we should get the play out of that very soon, Shep, and in total it's probably about 15 minutes, if maybe not a little bit longer than that. So we'll have a lot to chew over this afternoon. We'll see what some of the opposition members on Capitol Hill might have to say about what the president did this afternoon. So still a lot of news to be made from the White House this afternoon, a lot of reporting to do. Shep?
Chad Pergram, John, thanks. Stay with us. Chad Pergram up on Capitol Hill. This is the beginning.
Yeah, this is the beginning of the return of the process. Now, keep in mind, this will only go to the House of Representatives. Again, they're probably going to be about 40 votes short there. This will not go to the Senate. That's where some people thought that those 12 Senate Republicans who voted in favor of ending the national emergency yesterday kind of had air cover because, you know, it was not going to go to the Senate, and so they might be able to say, well, I'm for ending the national emergency, but I'm not going to have to vote to override. Keep in mind, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes arm twisting there a lot of strong-arming, trying to get Republican senators not to go along with this effort to end the national emergency. And what this tees up here in the next couple of months, and I know people don't want to hear this term, but the possibility of another government shutdown. The government is funded through September 30th. That's the end of this fiscal year. That's when they reopen the government after the 35-day shutdown earlier this winter. That's how long things are funded. But because they've been unable to undo this national emergency, I could see a scenario where appropriators, as they write the appropriations bills as they go into the fall, are putting provisions and strictures in there saying the president cannot use a national emergency for this purpose. And that could tee up a series of vetoes or a big veto on an omnibus, or as we call it, a minibus spending bill here on Capitol Hill. That, Shep, is going to be a battle royale come fall.
All right, I've just gotten a readout from the White House pool. This is quite a thing they have going on there. The president speaks, and a number of other people speak. We also have a photo of the president signing this bill that we'll get for you in just a second. There's some sheriffs who speak. The mother of someone who was killed by an undocumented immigrant will speak, and the president will say, essentially, I was elected by a very, very great group of American people, millions and millions of people who wanted security. We're going to sign something that will give us safety at our border. Of course, the truth is, after this signing, there's going to be a legal process. And the legal experts have suggested to us that the chances are very, very slim that anything will happen right away, because this matter will be tied up in legal suits. And the reason for that is very basic. The House of Representatives controls the money as prescribed in the Constitution and as written by the Founding Fathers. And when the president made the decision to build the wall by moving funds around or by declaring an emergency, he did so after the House of Representatives had already said, no, we're not doing this. So that's one avenue for legal challenges. And we're expecting those legal challenges will come almost immediately. And largely, this will become largely what it has been, a political matter. Our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, is out there. I'm guessing this event is about to wrap, so then they would turn the video around.
Yeah, we'll probably get that for you in the next 5 to 10 minutes. But you're talking about the legal ramifications of this and the legal angle. That's why the Attorney General, Bill Barr, was there. We don't see him in public very often, but he was there at the president's side. I've just got some sort of rough notes on what Barr was talking about. He said that the declaration of an emergency is clearly consistent with the law. He said emergency circumstances require a decisive response. And this is key here. The situation is exactly the kind of situation that the law was designed to cover. The crisis that we're dealing with today is right on our doorstep. And here's a key phrase, presents the American people with clear and present dangers. So that's what the Department of Justice is going to argue against all of these myriad lawsuits that have been filed. As I said, some private organizations have filed them, as have 21 states banding together. This may get tied up in the courts, but don't forget the president still has about $4-point-something billion to play with for a while. And ultimately, Shep, he believes he will prevail when it gets to the Supreme Court.
All right, Chad Pergram over up on the Hill for us. And Chad, there really is some division on the Republican side about whether there might be more who would come over. It's a matter of whether you can convince people. We're voting about the Constitution here. Not everybody's for border security. Nobody wants an open border. They've been very clear about that. They just have different ideas about how to do it, and some don't want to go around the Constitution to do it.
And that's where you have a lot of members, especially on the Republican side, who are strict constitutionalists, who Democrats will say, they're at odds with their principles. They got very upset at President Obama, signing executive orders and trying to go around Congress on certain things. Certainly with DACA was a good example of that.